How do PST accounts differ from HST accounts? Once a US business looks beyond the surface of Canadian sales tax, it quickly realizes that HST and PST accounts are not the same thing. They are run by different governments under different rules, with different registration processes and filing systems. For a foreign company selling across multiple provinces, confusing the two can lead to missed registrations or double taxation. Understanding how PST accounts differ from HST accounts gives you a clearer sense of how many separate tax systems you are actually dealing with and what that means for your internal processes. Different governments, different systems. HST is a harmonized system that combines the federal goods and services tax with a provincial component in certain provinces. It is administered by the Federal Canada Revenue Agency under the GST-HST framework. A single GST-HST account under your Canadian business number covers both GST and HST. PST, by contrast, is a standalone provincial sales tax. Each PST province runs its own tax program separate from the federal government. British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba each have their own PST legislation, registration forms, portals, and audit teams. Quebec's QST system is also provincial, administered separately by Revenue Quebec. HST accounts through CRA. An HST account is simply a GST-HST program account opened under your federal business number. Once you register, you charge GST or HST based on the place of supply rules and the applicable rate in each province. You file one set of GST-HST returns with CRA and report all your taxable supplies, whether they were taxed at the 5% rate or at a higher HST rate. Because GST-HST is a value-added tax, an HST account also allows you to claim input tax credits on GST-HST paid on eligible business expenses. That mechanism turns GST-HST into a flow-through tax on consumption rather than a cost for most registrants. PST accounts are provincial. PST accounts are opened directly with each PST province where you are required to collect provincial tax. There is no single national PST account. A registration in British Columbia does not cover Saskatchewan, and a Saskatchewan number does not cover Manitoba. Each province sets its own registration triggers, such as out-of-province sales thresholds, types of goods or services covered, and specific nexus tests for non-resident sellers. Because PST is a retail sales tax rather than a value-added tax, the logic of the system is different. You normally do not claim input tax credits for PST paid on your own purchases. Instead, the goal is that PST applies only at the point of final consumption, with resale or manufacturing exemptions applied earlier in the chain. Input tax credits versus non-recoverable PST. One of the most important differences between HST and PST accounts is how each system treats tax you pay on your own costs. Under GST-HST, a registered business that makes taxable or zero-rated supplies can generally claim input tax credits for GST-HST paid on expenses that relate to those commercial activities. That can lead to refunds or reduced net tax if your Canadian expenses are high relative to revenue. PST generally does not work that way. PST you pay on taxable purchases is usually a cost to your business, not a recoverable credit, unless you qualify for specific exemptions such as resale or manufacturing exemptions and handle them properly at the time of purchase. For many US businesses, this makes the PST layer feel heavier than the GST-HST layer once volumes grow in PST provinces. Filing and administration differences. From an administrative point of view, GST-HST returns are filed with CRA according to your assigned reporting frequency, which may be monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on your revenue and your choices. The forms, deadlines, and payment methods are standardized at the federal level. PST returns are filed separately with each province where you are registered. British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba each have their own filing frequencies, due dates, electronic portals, and audit practices. A late or missing PST return in one province is not visible to another province, but it can still trigger its own penalties and interest locally. This means a US company with significant Canadian sales might have one GST-HST account plus multiple PST or QST accounts, each with separate compliance calendars. What this means in practice. In practical terms, an HST account is your doorway into Canada's federal value-added tax system. It is needed when you exceed the $30,000 threshold in taxable supplies connected to Canada, or when you choose to register voluntarily to recover GST, HST paid on business inputs. A PST account, on the other hand, is something you open only when you meet the specific registration requirements of a particular province. For systems design, that means you need to be able to handle at least two tax engines. One for federal GST, HST, driven by place of supply rules, and one for provincial PST, driven by separate provincial rules. You also need internal processes that can reconcile GST, HST returns filed with CRA and PST returns filed with individual provinces without mixing the numbers. Final thoughts. PST and HST accounts are different animals. An HST account is part of the federal GST-HST framework and supports input tax credits and a unified return across multiple provinces. PST accounts live at the provincial level, follow different rules, and usually do not allow you to recover tax paid on your inputs. For a US business, this means you cannot treat Canadian sales tax as a single registration and a single return. If your sales reach meaningful levels in PST provinces, you may end up with a small stack of separate tax accounts, each with its own rules. Planning for that upfront, both in your contracts and your accounting systems, will make the growth much easier to manage. If you want more detail on how to sequence GST, HST, and PST registrations as your Canadian revenue grows, you can visit our website for workflow-style guides. If you require assistance with Canadian tax matters, our team is ready to provide reliable professional support. Please contact us at 416-283-8774 or visit theaccountingandtax.com for more information. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.